Desire and distraction often wear the same disguise. They both whisper to us, they both pull us toward something, and they both make us believe that what we want right now is the truth of who we are. But when I started to understand the real difference between them, my whole perspective shifted. Desire comes from a deep, quiet place inside, the part of us that knows what we truly want, even when we try to deny it. Distraction, on the other hand, is loud and restless. It comes from fear, from boredom, from the pressure to keep moving, even when we don't know where we're going. For a long time, I mistook distraction for desire. I chased things that sparkled for a moment, but left me feeling emptier each time. I thought I was following my heart, but I was only running from silence. Then one day, I sat alone with my thoughts long enough to hear the difference. Desire didn't scream. It whispered. It didn't promise instant excitement or validation. It offered peace. It was the voice that told me to create, to speak, to travel, to love honestly, even when it scared me. Distraction told me to stay busy, to compare, to please, to impress. But desire told me to be. It reminded me that the things that truly matter are not always urgent but are always essential. When I began to listen to that softer voice, I noticed that life started to align itself. The confusion I once carried began to fade because my choices came from clarity, not impulse. Following desire didn't mean ignoring logic or responsibility. It meant giving my truth a place in my decisions. I learned that when something is truly meant for you, it doesn't create chaos, it brings calm. Distraction fades when we finally recognize what's real. And the moment we stop running after everything and start moving toward what calls us from within, that's when desire becomes direction. Fear is the quiet thief of dreams. It doesn't always appear as panic or terror. Sometimes it hides behind logic, responsibility, or even politeness. It whispers that we are not ready yet, that we might fail, that people will judge us. And slowly, it convinces us to shrink. For a long time, I thought fear was my protector, the thing that kept me safe from mistakes. But the truth was, it was keeping me safe from growth. Every time I had a desire to do something bold, to take a step that felt real and alive, fear was there, wrapping itself around my thoughts, making me believe it was caution when it was actually control. I began to see how fear built invisible walls around me. It didn't stop me from living, but it stopped me from living fully. I would plan my dreams in my head, but never take them into action. I would imagine speaking my truth, but then stay silent because it was more comfortable. Fear told me that comfort was peace, but peace is something entirely different. Peace comes when you've faced fear and walked through it, not when you've surrendered to it. The moment I began to challenge fear, I realized it wasn't as powerful as I thought. It was made of fragile thoughts, not unbreakable truths. Each time I acted despite fear, it grew smaller. Each time I said yes to something that scared me but mattered, I discovered more of who I was. Fear doesn't disappear completely. It still shows up, still whispers, still tries to bargain. But now I know that fear shows up most when something is meaningful. It's a sign that you're on the edge of change, standing in front of something that could define you. And when you take that one brave step forward, the fear doesn't vanish, but it transforms into fuel, into strength, into the quiet confidence that tells you that you're becoming who you were always meant to be. Saying yes to yourself is one of the most powerful decisions you can ever make. For most of my life, I said yes to everyone else, to expectations, to obligations, to the voices that told me what I should do. I became good at pleasing, at adjusting, at fitting into shapes that weren't meant for me. But every time I said yes to others while saying no to myself, a small part of me went quiet. I didn't notice it at first, but the silence grew louder. It was the silence of unspoken dreams, ignored passions, and unlived moments. I realized that I had been waiting for someone else to give me permission to follow my own desires. But that permission was mine to give all along. The day I decided to say yes to myself, everything changed in subtle but powerful ways. I started listening to what I really wanted, not what was expected, not what was convenient. It wasn't about being selfish, it was about being honest. Saying yes to myself meant trusting my instincts, valuing my time, and respecting my emotions. It meant walking away from things that drained me and moving toward things that filled me. It meant admitting that my dreams weren't impossible, they were just waiting for me to choose them. When you say yes to yourself, the world around you starts to reflect that energy. People who truly value you will understand. Opportunities that align with your purpose will appear. And even when challenges come, they no longer feel like obstacles, they feel like part of the path you chose. Saying yes to yourself doesn't mean life becomes easy, it means it becomes real. It's the moment you stop living on autopilot and start living with intention. You begin to understand that the most important approval you'll ever need isn't from the world, it's from the reflection staring back at you in the mirror, waiting for you to finally say, "Yes, I choose you." There comes a point in life when the voices around us become louder than the one within us. Society has a way of teaching us what success should look like, what happiness should feel like, and what kind of person we should become. From childhood, we're told to follow the rules, to fit in, to make choices that look right on the outside, even if they don't feel right on the inside. The world rewards compliance more than authenticity, and somewhere along the way, we start mistaking other people's expectations for our own desires. I remember realizing how often I made decisions not because I wanted to, but because I didn't want to disappoint anyone. It's easy to confuse the sound of approval with the sound of purpose. The inner voice, however, doesn't shout. It whispers. It doesn't compete with the world's noise. It waits for you to be still enough to listen. When I finally began to pay attention to it, I noticed how honest it was, sometimes uncomfortably honest. It told me when I was pretending, when I was settling, when I was staying somewhere just because it was familiar. The voice of society told me to keep everything looking perfect. My inner voice told me that perfection was making me miserable. That contrast became the moment of awakening. Following your inner voice isn't about rebellion. It's about alignment. It's about living in a way that feels true even when it doesn't look impressive to others. The more I listened, the more peace I found. The noise outside never completely disappears. People will always have opinions, judgments, and advice. But when your inner voice grows stronger, their noise loses power. You start to recognize that your life isn't meant to be a performance, it's meant to be a reflection of your truth. And the moment you honor that inner voice over the external noise, you realize that freedom isn't about doing whatever you want, it's about finally becoming who you are. There was a moment in my life when everything around me felt predictable, safe, and yet deeply unfulfilling. I was doing what was expected, following the path everyone said was right, but deep down I knew something was missing. It wasn't that my life was bad, it was just not mine. Then came a moment that tested everything I believed about comfort, risk, and choice. I remember standing there, faced with an opportunity that both excited and terrified me. Every logical part of my mind said to walk away, to stay where things were secure. But my heart whispered something different. It said, "This is what you've been waiting for." And for the first time in a long time, I chose to listen. The moment I followed that desire, the world seemed to shift around me. It wasn't about the result, it was about the courage it took to act. I realized that sometimes our desires are not random, they are signals from our deeper selves, calling us toward something meaningful. That decision opened doors I never knew existed, but it also tested me in ways I couldn't have imagined. There were doubts, fears, and moments when I questioned everything. Yet, even in uncertainty, there was a sense of rightness, a quiet assurance that I was finally walking in alignment with who I truly was. Following desire doesn't mean everything falls into place instantly. It means stepping into a life that's more honest, more alive. It teaches you that growth never comes from safety, it comes from the willingness to follow what moves your soul. That moment became more than just a choice, it became a turning point. It reminded me that when we trust our inner pull, even if it defies logic, life starts to meet us halfway. And while others may not understand your decision, the truth is, your heart doesn't need their permission, it only needs your courage to listen and follow where it leads. Choosing heart over approval is one of the hardest lessons to learn because approval feels safe. It gives us validation, belonging, and the illusion of acceptance. For most of my life, I wanted people to like me, to think I was doing well, to see me as someone who had it all together. I learned how to read faces, how to adjust my words, how to mold my choices so they would fit what others expected. And for a while, it worked. I was admired, appreciated, even praised. But somewhere deep inside, I felt empty. Approval filled the space around me, but not within me. It's easy to forget that the applause of others can never replace the peace of self-respect. The turning point came when I realized that the more I tried to please others, the further I drifted from myself. I began to feel like a stranger in my own story, acting out a version of me that didn't feel true. The heart, however, never stops speaking. It keeps reminding you of what matters, of the things that bring you joy, of the people who make you feel alive, of the path that feels real even if it isn't popular. Following that voice means risking disapproval. It means accepting that not everyone will understand your choices. But it also means reclaiming your freedom. When I started to choose what felt right over what looked right, my life became quieter but more meaningful. The noise of judgment faded, replaced by a deeper connection to myself. Approval from others can be taken away at any time, but self-trust stays with you. The heart doesn't ask for permission, it asks for honesty. And when you finally stop living for the applause and start living for your truth, you realize that approval was never the goal, peace was. Because at the end of the day, it's not about who claps for you, but about whether your own heart feels proud of the life you're living.